person who was hosting, oh, the person who was hosting it said, it's been 2 years I haven't dressed up.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, yes, please do a dress up party. And so that was the day. It was I want to say a couple of months ago. That was the day I finally took out my suit, like a sports jacket and
Sure.
three-piece suit. Didn't wear it high though. I was like, I'm not gonna wear it just for a birthday party. So like all the ladies were nicely dressed up, with the gowns and all that. And there were like 3 guys who dressed up, and all the others came in the usual.
Gotcha.
This is Seattle, man. Nobody dresses up. So I'm like,
That's-
I'm gonna dress up. This is a dress up party. So that was kind of nice.
Good. So just for the sake of recording, Pierce, this is just a good-natured, channel you into the process. So hope you got a little bit of a chuckle. And good. So, thanks for making it. I felt that, even though it's last minute, I like the idea of just trying to keep the steady rhythm when we can, so not a problem if we can't, but saw the opportunity that we can get it together.
Sure.
That said, my personal schedule's been pretty hectic, and even this morning I just kind of got in from running doing a few things, so I didn't get a chance to really kind of do a bit of call over or prep for this discussion. So figure just put it to to what unfolds. But I do have a few threads. I did sit for a little bit and have a few threads that we can discuss, or if anything's moved on for either of you, if there's something different. But if you would just give it a run, see what appears. I did point, Kimberly, when I saw your email, it pulled me to an aspect of lesson 2. So, there's a bit of a reading we could do if we feel like that's up.
Yeah, thank you. That was that felt very appropriate for where I was going. That
Good.
was
Works for me. I'm just along for
suggestion.
the ride, honestly. So whatever you all want to talk about.
Okay.
I'm good.
Well, first, now that we had our chuckle, okay. And what I thought, I said that's what jumped out in your email is, for me, is I have many gaps in my knowledge about how all of this work fits together, but I'm having trouble finding a thread to pull on to get started. Do you want to speak any more to that? Fill it out a little bit.
Well, I guess I feel like there's so much in this work. And there's so many different components of everything from the 5 centers to different levels of consciousness, of knowing, being, doing. Just there's so many different elements to it, essence versus personality, and so I can take each one of these as a chunk and be like, wow, that's really informative. I can grab onto that. But then I try to pull it into my life, and I'm like, I get kind of fragmented on how to bring all of these sort of concepts of the 5 centers or the knowing, being, doing, and taking all of this into a life in a cohesive sort of way. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Sure. Sorry, just grabbed on to something you said. Anything else you want to say? Add to that, or
not right now.
Okay. All right. And Sachin, anything you want to add or talk about where you are today? Or
No, I mean, kind of just piling on to Kim a little bit. I think I dealt with something like that, something like what Kim's going through, I don't know, a few years ago. And from the readings that I did, everything that I did and everything I tried, I came to the conclusion that the easiest thing to do is break it down. Break it down into two things really. quote that I brought up last week. One is, if you're missing knowledge, if you're lost, get knowledge. If you have knowledge, start acting. If you're acting, do it consistently. Right. So that is pretty much what I've been trying to do. Like, and so what I've seen is I start to act, and I've been blamed frequently for acting before I know everything, or acting too early, or make a decision and go. But I've Kim's smiling. I know she's like, make a decision. You make all these decisions without knowing. You buy all these stocks, and you like without before knowing what the hell's going on. And I, do it, just do it, and there's rubber meets the road, and you either succeed or you fail. I'm not saying go do, put a blindfold on and go walking around in the middle of the freeway. That's stupid. You're just gonna die. Like, so do the reading, get the knowledge first, some small amount of knowledge. When you feel that you're not gonna get run over, act. Take a small action. Assume you will fail. Assume you will stumble. Assume you will hopefully not get badly hurt. Take all of that, set of expectations, go and try it. Then try it again, try it again. Try as many small things as possible until you have some measure of success, small success. And then take on the next step or quit. Either way, right? Go find something else.
Right.
So that's sort of the philosophy I've followed, and it seems to work mostly. It's kind of slow and boring sometimes, but it seems to work.
All right. So I'm seeing, just feeling like kind of like the first or second time I'm using the whiteboard function here. So there were two things I see. I'll start with Sachin's words, right? So, and then let's see, I'll just use these symbols as arrows. And doing. So Sachin, you were saying, right, it's knowledge and then do. And we're even talking about
I would say it's knowledge, action, and consistency. Those three, that's law of three, right? Those three words: knowledge, action, consistency. Just rinse and repeat, knowledge, action, consistency.
Okay.
And what you do, what that knowledge is and what that action is very situational. I can go into specifics if we need to, but I think that I don't need to. That's it. Those are three things. That's it.
All right. So consistency. All right. I'm hearing in that, let me just put Kimberly's words up also. Right. And Kimberly, you said this in this sequence: knowing, what was it? Being, doing. All right, that was the sequence that you stated. So, Sachin, what I'm seeing is, what you stated was a back and forth between the idea of knowledge and taking action on knowledge. And I think what I heard in there, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that's a cycle, whereas I see in the consistency is, steady, there's a beingness in the consistency. It's steady repetition, being, definition, constant, but it's a way of applying the knowledge in action.
Yeah, I think the way that I think either of this is fine. I think I would just, in how I've seen it work is that, so the being is really happens when you have consistency. It's a little flipped from what I'm saying, that so the knowledge is knowing, right? The action is the doing.
Yeah.
And the consistency is the being. Like, you are something, or you represent something when you're doing it,
right,
very high percentage of the time,
right,
which is consistency. Like, when you have an option to do something or say something, and do you go and be, or do you act consistently? What are your habits? How do you behave? Like, that's sort of the being aspect which the consistency fits. And again, these are different models. Like they don't necessarily match. I wouldn't try to, match one for one. These are not.
Sure.
Not apples and oranges. So.
Well, would it be fair to say that the way you're speaking it is that there's not, if it's sequential, if we're saying, okay, this is moment one in a particular area, right? You mentioned, say choosing or not to buy a stock. So this is moment one where you're looking at a stock. Are you first seeking knowledge about it? And let's say you make the decision to purchase the stock. So then you take action.
I think that's too specific. I think stock is less. That's not a good example.
You pick a different example. It's fine. But I think I'm trying to understand or clarify where you're coming from. Is there a sequence implied?
There is a sequence. I mean, it's a sequence that really works, because if you do, like I was saying, the example I gave earlier, where, hey, if you go walk down a highway without really knowing which direction the traffic is and how to drive and what the rules of the road are. So if you go without knowing, you're going to get run over. So the knowing has to a certain extent happen first. Like even with the simple taking an action, right? How does a child start to walk?
Yeah.
Like the child has to figure out what the balance is. Child has to figure out how much it weighs. Child has to figure out how to put 1 feet. Well, it's not 1 feet. Usually it's like crawling first. So child has to start learning that. In this case, the child learns by doing, because it's actually doing it. So that's a physical example. But if you take more of a habits example, like how do you learn algebra? Like if you start to go try to add things without really knowing, your 1 + 1 is never going to be 1. It's always going to be some other random number. So you actually have to go read a book and say, okay, why is 1 + 1 = 2? Why? Because it's 1 and 1. And so you have to do a little bit of knowing, and how much knowing you do depends on what are you trying to tackle, and over what period of time, and how complex it is, right? So simple things, just read a book, 15 minutes, there you go. You learn, you drive. You probably want to take at least a couple 2-hour classes when somebody teaches you, and then you do, and you do it over and over again, and you become consistent. So you become a good driver, right? So the driving is probably a better example that people can really understand. So
in the driving, right, we start with a learning, right? How do you start the car? Which one's the gas and which is the brake? How do you steer it, right? And then you practice it, right? Maybe the first few times someone's in the front seat guiding you, and eventually you're on your own, and then you do it over and over again for that consistency and build up the habit of it, and the capabilities, the acumen for it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and that's what I've seen works. I'm not saying that's the only model. That seems to have worked for me. I still make mistakes. That's normal. Okay. But I generally don't make big ones until I start doing it. Oh, I'm going to go drive on a track. Great. That's a big deal. I'm going to be driving at 160 miles an hour. I don't think I want to do that. That's a little dangerous. I just don't want to do it. Right. So at least I know enough to not take that chance. Right? Yeah. But can I drive on a really treacherous, like curvy road, like 5 miles over the limit? Probably not immediately after I've learned to drive. But once I get really good, I can probably drive pretty much anywhere in the world, as long as there's a street, even dirt roads. Okay. And so that's kind of starting to stretch me. So
what I'm starting to see here, though, is, in whatever the action is, I think, can we agree that we've established a general sequence, right? Yeah. All right, we start with the knowledge, we take action, and we do it in repetition to gain aptitude, capability in that area. Okay. Now, Kimberly, you said within your speaking, and it jumped out at me, I'm sure it wasn't intentional to frame it. To me, I would say it's probably spoken in no particular order, but you said knowing, being, doing. And that in that order. And that's, it was like, okay. It's, again, I'm seeing sequential.
Are you talking about me or Kim here? Because I thought I
It's
said
for
no.
Kim.
Kim, yeah. Okay.
Are you seeing anything in that for yourself, or anything, if I'm just simply reflecting that back, you know, having just picked up on a sequence that was probably no particular sequence?
Well, so I'm not entirely clear on how these fit together. What comes up for me, I remember a session at some point where I thought that Pierce suggested that knowing, being, and doing was the order, because you can't do unless it's unless you're being it. And reading that lesson too, I did review that this morning just to see, so I could orient. He talks about understanding as a deeper level of knowing, and so you can, I guess another example is you can get the textbook version of how to drive a car,
Right.
and so you can know it, but that doesn't mean that you can do it. There has to be something in between that gets you from knowing to doing. And so I see that as being the understanding piece and the becoming piece. But I'm not sure, I'm not sure it totally makes sense to me that you can do something unless, or that you can be something unless you've done it. So I guess I'm kind of grappling back and forth with kind of how those two fit together and how understanding fits into this whole mix.
Okay, so you just said, oh, you just said, wait, how, oh, right, it was like, how can you be something unless you do it? Was that accurate?
That was the last statement.
Yeah. Did I get it accurately? I got momentarily tripped up with Zoom whiteboard technology. So how can you be something unless you do it?
It sort of seems like the manifestation, maybe manifestation, the doing of it is the last step.
Okay.
I'm kind of thinking of like energy and density, like something, an idea comes to us. So that's like a thought form. And then it enters a process of envisioning it into being. So maybe there's, I don't know. I guess I kind of end up going in swirls with all
Okay.
of this.
So I'm gonna postulate something, and just for clarity amongst us, is that you know, I can't point to a particular lesson in the Eminent Way or the Emin or anything here. So what I'm sharing is really from my own experiential with things. So
Mhm.
I can't guarantee that there's something that might not, you know, not be contradictory in one of the lessons or something Pierce said and so on. So sharing my experience of where I'm coming from. So, okay, I'd like to offer up that being is a state. Or how about being as a state, right? A state of being.
Mhm.
I'll offer a word that probably isn't in the dictionary: beingness. Right? We're always being. So this is something, you know, we're brought up in the world, right? What do you want to be when you grow up? Right? Ask that to a child, and the stereotypical answer, you know, might be a fireman, a nurse, a teacher, right? Our culture commonly just, that means, oh, what's my career?
Mhm.
What do I want to achieve, right? What Sachin was saying is, being this, right? I want to be a driver, right? So I have to have the knowledge of the car. I need to do it over and over again before I'm awarded the driver's license, and then I am a driver. So these things are, I would offer the idea, we all use it in common language, but I would offer that being, the way we use it commonly, is pretty sloppy.
Mhm.
And when I looked at your email, right, I have many gaps in my knowledge about how all of this work fits together, but I am having trouble finding a thread to pull on to get started. And what I saw in that is a seeking of, okay, if I just have the right lesson, if I just understand the complex this way, or the centers that way, or something, right? And this is how, again, there's no fault, this is how our society functions. We were born into this. But I want to offer that beingness. It's my cat being a cat, if you heard him. Beingness is a state. And if we want to even just offer something a little more tangible, is from the moment you're born, you are being a human. So you're always being a something. You don't actually have to go out and do something to be being a human, to be being alive. So I'd like to put on the table here that being, and then we'll move into consciousness, but being is not time related. Right? A thread to pull on to get started, seeking knowledge. And please, Kim, I hope you don't feel like I'm picking on you. I'm taking language and being specific to see if there's something between those words or behind those words. Right. And I'm wondering if we can come at it maybe a little bit with a different distinction of, you're always being something.
Mhm.
I'll pause there, particularly if Sachin wants to say anything, or either of you want to say anything.
I think I agree. I think there's an empowerment there and a trap in always being, because the empowerment there is, you have this fallback. You're always being something.
Mhm.
So you don't have to do anything. And that's the trap. Like, you don't have to do anything. You're lazy. You don't have to do anything. You're always going to be being whatever it is you're being, which is the default state of your being. So that's a trap.
But no, not necessarily, right? Because you could be in the beingness of lazy. Now you start winding up, right? There's a freedom in that. I am being lazy. I've chosen that. So now we're starting to enter consciousness, right? We have it. So if you're just being a fireman, right? You're showing up to work, you're putting on your hat, there's a call and you get on the truck, right? That's the career being. But when you could begin to observe, right? So this is a lot of what we've been working on, is observing, right? The monkeys, that kind of thing, where it's not just a body moving around in life or in day to day, right? We're observing I'm getting specific with the language. We're observing something that I define as my body moving around in life. Do you notice the subtle difference that there's a distinction, right? I'm going to the store versus I'm making a choice to move this body to the store. Do you see a distinction there?
Yeah, and that aspect of actually taking control and doing, well, that's now that goes into doing. So that act of actually taking control, so sort of knowing and doing seem, from what I'm understanding it, like those top two things, on the very first line, knowledge and action, like knowing and doing seem to be how being really happens. And to your point, if you don't do much doing, then the being that happens is laziness. Whether you intended to be lazy or not, that's just the being that happens. If you just sit around on the couch and watch TV, that's just being laziness. A lot of people just don't make that. They don't recognize that by not actually doing anything, or by sitting in the couch and eating popcorn, watching a movie. Well, no, forget watching a movie. That's probably doing. But that's the key here. And I think kind of going back to what Kim was saying, the knowing is, it's not, in my opinion, indispensable. That you have to know. I mean, you're going to know, and you're going to operate at the level of your knowing. As you keep knowing more and more and more, you're going to operate at a higher level of knowing. You'll be able to take on things that need more knowing, things that are more complicated, things that are more impactful, things that are bigger. So if you don't do much knowing, you're just going to stay where you're knowing. You don't go to school, you stay in kindergarten, then you can operate at that level. You'll not understand calculus, for example, or even algebra. Okay. But if you go to school, if you get a master's, I think Kim, you have a master's. You get a master's, you can actually have a conversation with the PhD and do some very basic research, really core research or very advanced research. So you have to do the knowing. What knowing you get sort of defines your impact on creation.
So I'm gonna offer, looking at lesson 2, right? There's 4 levels of consciousness, right? And I'm gonna read them from the bottom up. So number 4 is subconscious or subconsciousness. Number 3 is normal waking consciousness. Number 2 is the consciousness of the real I, also called self-consciousness. And number 1 is the consciousness of the divine. Sachin, I would offer that what you're talking about is the normal waking consciousness, and still this idea that if I amass sufficient knowledge, I will be a something, right? If I gather enough knowledge in a particular area, I can get a doctorate, and then society tells me that I have achieved expertise in that area, and now I am being a doctor.
Yeah, I agree. I think everything that I said goes only up to the 3rd level. It definitely doesn't go to the knowing of the divine. This is very much about the I, to a lot. Very much about that. Really not necessarily going past that at this
Okay,
point.
so let's shift this up before we go to the divine, because that's the next, that's number 1 on this list, or we'll call it the top level. Is number 2 is the consciousness of the real I. The consciousness of the real I doesn't necessarily need knowledge in a particular area, doesn't necessarily pass a judgment on whether they're a couch potato or not. The consciousness of the real I starts to observe simply what appears to be as so. Just what is so. So if we use your lazy example, right? The consciousness of the real I is observing and saying, I am sitting on the sofa, eating popcorn, watching a movie. In normal waking consciousness, you're just doing it. You might even be doing subconscious if your moving center is just eating the popcorn, not even paying attention. I think what I'm trying to illustrate is that I'm trying to take beingness out of a temporal space. I'm trying to take it out of a linear idea. You're always in a being. Right? Again, by definition, like you're being human. If you're alive, if you're alive in this configuration, we call it human. You're always being a human. You could also always be a lazy human. But the difference is, all right, if someone's on the outside saying that's a lazy human, it's almost, in this conversation, it's almost irrelevant. Then you're going to yourself, you're judging yourself. Oh, I'm a lazy human, right? Which basically in this tonality, we're saying that's bad. So we're already putting judgment, the identity is already engaged because we put a judgment of laziness and laziness being bad. In the higher level of consciousness, it becomes an observation without the judgment. Any of that being, right? How much knowledge do you really need to be successful to sit on a sofa and watch Netflix and eat popcorn? Not much, right?
Not much. I mean, Jeff, I think I'm want to dive a little bit into this. There's the whole judgment aspect of it, which is like, I don't. So the observation aspects of it, I get. Like I frequently catch myself, hey, it's 10 p.m. I should go to sleep, but no, I'm gonna keep playing this stupid, computer game. Okay. I'm observing myself. It started playing at 10. It's 10:30 now. I'm still playing. I'm like, this is bad. I'm just gonna play 5 more minutes. Okay, fine. Right, and the 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and now it's 11 p.m. I've been playing this stupid game for 1 hour. Right. So I'm observing myself. I'm judging myself, but I'm still not strong enough to act. And the act here is to stop. Like the act here is to stop playing the game. Like I'm only acting by being, well,
is it
it's not necessarily, it's kind of who is in control, like which part of me is in control, enough of a control to make a decision. So I think you asked the right question. Is it? Well, do we define even asking the question of is it as an aspect of sort of like, so in my head, I'm thinking I'm making that judgment. So I'm looking at myself, I'm judging myself and saying, oh, this is bad. You should not be playing stupid computer useless games. They give you almost no value. You're just addicted to it. So you keep playing it. That aspect of it, where does that fit in? Like the aspect
let's pull on that thread. So remember the exercise of will haves and won't haves? You make the list of the things you will have and the things you won't have in your life.
Yeah. I think I remember that. So yeah, this is not
on perhaps on an unconscious basis, you on your mental list, you said, I won't have excessive video game playing. And you're doing it anyway. Now we're making a thing about it. Right. Now, whether you consciously thought of that thing or not, right, that's another case to once again visit those lists if that speaks to you. But in that, right, what's your being in that scenario, right? It's a scene and it's late, you should get to sleep. You've been at the video game for a long time. You've got voices in your head going, I'm bad, I should get to sleep, one more game, boy, I'm weak, I don't have the will, I'm not stopping, right? Whatever the whole the story is. What's your beingness in that? So now start observing it. What are you being in that drama?
I think a part of me is being the, I'm just making it one part of me, or one me, or one I is being the teacher saying, hey, you shouldn't be doing this, stupid. And the other part of me is just being a completely undisciplined person saying, I'm just going to do what, being a rebel, for want of a better word. Like, I'm just going to do whatever the heck I want. I don't care about you. Other part of the person is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Mr. Hyde saying, yeah, whatever, I'll do whatever the fuck I want. I'll play as many games as I want. Dr. Jekyll is saying, this is not good for you. Like, it's that. So I guess I'm being both. Like, there's two parts of me that I'm being, and there's a third part of me which is kind of looking at all of this and saying, oh, it's such a sad thing. Maybe that's the third part that is observing all that.
Yes.
Is the real being. That's, I'm not at that level yet. Occasionally, maybe now
you just touched on it, right? And if you start thinking and processing, like, okay, remove the word sad, that too is a judgment. But now you start getting into a third vector, right? When I sense is there is that, am I describing this in neutral tone? That's like a measure for me, because I get to, you know, I'll go fuck that guy, or that sucks, or whatever. But I know I'm not at my real I. Now, along the way, I've given myself permission to not always be at my real I, so I don't worry about it. I give myself permission to say that guy sucks. But I also know that it's not even real. That's just a momentary expression to move energy. I don't know anything about that guy. And things happen, right? So now I'm starting to get to a place of more neutrality, right? When I say that sucks, I'm kind of saying you don't fit my judgment, or that action, right? These are very loaded kind of things. But at the level of consciousness, at the real I can't actually take any of that seriously. None of it is true. And now now I start getting into a space of being that I can recognize something that's closer to an organic consciousness, just a little closer to the divine, right? We're not there yet in the narrative, but we're a little closer.
And I think I get this. It's I think, to me, I quickly sort of extrapolate this to bigger things. Like, what is, or more impactful, like, oh, something like, hey, I'm walking down the street and some dude spits on the street. Okay, come on, man. So why you, or some dude, eats a chocolate and throws a wrapper on the street. I'm like, come on, man, why are you doing that? Okay, that's fine. I can let that go. I'm like, hey, I observed, he is whatever. I'm not even judging, or maybe I'm judging, but I'm letting it go. Like, part of me judging, but I'm just letting it go. The other part is saying, let it go. Don't talk. Or the third part is just going to go pick it up and throw it in the trash bin, whatever. And so, but when you start to make it bigger, and when you start to look at bigger things, impactful things, like, I have to go to bigger things, and those happen to be current politics, unfortunately, or take Russia. Like, bigger things like whatever is going on. What you're doing is destroying creation, destroying life. Like, you're destroying millions of people's lives. That is abhorrent. So now I get it, that you can see, okay, well, the non-judgmental part of it is saying, okay, this is needed for creation. Maybe you'll have a fight and you'll figure it out, and then the world will be better off for it. Got it. Fine. I can let it go. But at what level can you not let it go? At what level, at what level is it? Like, somebody blows off a nuke. Do you say, okay, this person now killed 20 million people. Can't let it go.
Yeah, but all right, but I'll say all of that. You're just talking about scale, not
That's
level.
where I get confused. Like the scale is where I'm not necessarily confused. Well, I extrapolate because I mean a lot of these things are so unlikely to happen, and the extrapolation is so unlikely to happen, and it's so not relevant to my life that it doesn't even matter.
Oh,
Shouldn't
yeah,
even hang on.
So let me maybe paint it this way, and I don't want to get too stuck on this. Some of this you may have to just kind of take back and process. But okay, what's the difference? Somewhere there's a planet with sentient life on it. A meteor hits it and destroys it. All living things on the planet die. Versus Russia invades Ukraine and kills a whole bunch of people and gets gets a whole bunch of their soldiers killed. We have a moral difference, but at the level of greater consciousness, what happened? So you see the difference.
I mean,
is
it's just
scale difference.
the scale. It's also probability. Like it's like, hey, this is, you could say this is almost a natural part of evolution of humanity, trying out,
Yep.
authoritarianism and monarchy and
Yeah.
whatever, dictatorial, against a more open, more free, more anti-monarchical form of
Yeah.
government.
I
Like
think we've drifted off topic. I think I'd offer to
yeah.
you, the distinction between scale and level. Right. Comes to mind Yoda, size matters not, right? It's I think I would just leave it there because I'd like to get back to beingness.
Yeah. All right. I guess let's get back to being. I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna be buttering around, so I'll put my camera off a little bit.
Okay.
You have my headphones on.
All right. So Kim, I'm going back to your sentence, and I'll just try, now I'll try to bring it right, to what I wanted to offer. Right. Having trouble finding a thread on to get started, right? So knowledge on how so we're trying the brain, the thinking center, we're trying to fit this lesson in with that and that mechanics and so on. I'm taking on the board here, knowing, being, and doing. And what I've already offered is that beingness is just a state. But if we can just, in a moment of time, create a sequence, I'd offer that the beingness comes first. That how those pieces fit together becomes a different thing depending on one's being.
I think what's coming up for me is I can, there's so many different ways that I can look at this. And I think a lot of it hinges on how we're defining being. If you take beingness out of this linear way of thinking and just make it a foundational state, then the knowing and the doing act within the being. Just sort of players within this state of beingness, maybe.
Yes, that's what I'd like
versus another way of looking at the being is being a driver. Like, how can I consider myself to be a driver unless, and that's chunking it down. That's very much in the relative world of how we operate in this physical existence of players and people and forces and whatever else. And so I agree with you when we're taking beingness as sort of that essential, and I guess that goes to Pierce's discussion of essence versus personality,
Mhm.
where we have this essential nature that is part of that real I or that real self or whatever you want to say. And the personality, the knowing and the doing and the emoting occur within that state of essence. But then I also, I guess part of what throws me off with this whole thing is that at the bottom of that lesson 2, for example,
Mhm.
um, Pierce discusses the passive form as knowledge to being to understanding, and the active form as being to understanding to doing. And so I think you're speaking to the being, the understanding, and the doing.
Yes.
Um, how does the passive form fit into that?
Can you repeat those two again? Just a second. So could you repeat? I haven't read the chapter, unfortunately, but could you just repeat? So there's two sort of.
Okay, so there's active form and there's passive form.
Okay.
The active form is being to doing to, sorry, being to understanding to doing.
That's
So
active.
that's coming from an essential state of being, as I'm seeing, and then you know and you grow that knowing to understanding, and once it's been integrated, then you're able to do it, is sort of my interpretation of that. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And then the passive form is knowledge to being to understanding. And maybe that's more of the driver in the car scenario, where you first understand where the steering wheel, the brake, and the accelerator are, and how to get the key in the ignition. And then you practice it to master it, to become it, the driver, and then you understand it. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out how these
Okay.
apply.
Yeah. Got it. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I'll read into it, but I would love to hear Jeffrey's thoughts.
Yeah. I think this is it. I'm glad I didn't get that far in the document, but I think it's exactly it. So yeah, the passive form, right? Which if I'll link it up to it, in the list of levels of consciousness, right? Normal waking consciousness, right? I'd offer that we join it in the passive form, where we have knowledge, we're being, and I'm just one, actually is a question I would have then, knowledge to doing. See, I'd have to read this, because my question would be in this application is being and doing in this application synonymous?
Yeah.
Right.
And this is passive form. So maybe this is just how to get knowledge to understanding. Maybe there
Yep.
is doing.
Right. So in using the right, I learned how to start the car. I learned which one's the gas and the brake. I do it, right? Or I am, see, here's where I hesitate on being. I'd have to read that. But let's say for the moment that's the doing, just like Sachin was saying. And then by doing it consistently, we have an understanding. I understand driving.
Mhm.
Right. We're in the active form, which is what we're trying to get to here, right? We come from our beingness first. So from our being, we gain an understanding. We're connecting to ourselves, we're connecting to our higher selves, and we're connecting at that level 1 elements of the divine. Then it's the doing.
Mhm.
Knowledge, factual knowledge, Googling stuff is simply a task. From that beingness, what we're doing in the active form, right? We're first recognizing the beingness that I am, right? Am I being, I'm intentionally using incorrect grammar. Am I beingness, or is my beingness lazy? Right. Well, maybe that's not a place that understanding is going to unfold. Right. How much understanding might I get if my beingness is lazy, sitting on the sofa, eating popcorn, watching a movie? Yet I could still sit on the sofa, eat popcorn, watch a movie, have a level of beingness that is active, and gain lots of understanding. Same actions, different state of being. Active versus passive. Right? So there, my doing of eating popcorn, watching a movie is the last in the temporal sequence. I'm first being, I'm being human, I'm alert, I'm aware, right? I'm understanding that, without any connotations, we'll just use the language, I'm being lazy, but I'm active lazy. So I am doing the act of eating popcorn and watching a movie. But now more of my complex, more of my capabilities are engaged in it. Now, if we really want to circle it back, that value judgment of lazy being bad suddenly isn't, because you're conscious. And in that, right? So now you're not judging lazy, and in that you have more freedom of choice. It's not lazy. I'm actively choosing to watch a movie. And in so doing, if I choose it, my beingness is actively doing. I could also choose, time out, 2 hours watching a movie. But there's a freedom in having the awareness to working that out. And as you do it over and over again, it sounds like I'm, spelling it out, step 1, step 2, step 3. It becomes more and more automatic. You're almost never mindlessly sitting yourself on the couch and just chomping down popcorn and watching a movie. You usually have, if it becomes more automatic, you're going, okay, Friday night, did the week, done, this is my movie time. And you could still be active, or you can choose passive in the movie time. But either way, your monkeys aren't driving the ship. Your habits and moving center aren't driving the ship, right? Your consciousness, right? Your consciousness, your real I is either driving the ship or saying, you know what, not, for the next 2 hours, I'm not going to drive the ship. But you made the decision from that place to not drive the ship. That changes the engagement.
Yeah, that kind of changes everything about how we interact with that,
Yes.
with the choices that we're making.
Yes. So now I'd like to offer, right back to your original thing, gaps in your knowledge and how it all fits together. I'd offer that you tune into your beingness first. I'd also, one of the things from Gurdjieff, and using the language of the Eminent, we use the language of detection. So you do your development in life. One of the methodologies I use is I detect what appears, what I call appears in my sphere. And if I start detecting patterns of what appears in my sphere, that's how I begin to acquire knowledge. And if it requires knowledge that needs me to Google it, I'll go Google it. If it's experiential, I might choose to experience it. But at this level, I'm observing life as it appears in my sphere. And then receiving that as communications to the best of my ability at any given time. And I'm not always on. Sometimes I'm mindlessly watching movies.
You said something that I lost. You said detect patterns to something, and I forget what you said, but that really landed.
Okay.
I mean, it something that was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I'm detecting. So if, say in a given week, someone sends me an email, I read it and I go, all right, interesting, whatever, put it aside. 2 days later, I'm talking to someone and they say something else. And I go, oh, wow, that's kind of similar. All right, I see a beginning connection. Start paying attention to this. And maybe the next day, something actually happens. I go, oh, something's telling me to really pay attention to this. There's something in there. I start engaging with life itself as a communication, right? And in that, like the notions of lazy, or, and I'm using, Satch, I'm using these as, really what I'm trying to say is the judgments begin to fall away. Is, the lazy or the lack of will, or that's bad and that sucks. When it's at a place where I'm observant of communications within life, there is, those judgments aren't there. Also, judgments of good are not there. I don't say, oh, hey, that's great. Or, wow, what a winning day. And, there's no good and there's no bad in this space. And now the beingness is one of observancy, openness. Sometimes I close it. Sometimes it's not helpful to be open, right? Like I'll find if I have to wind up get in an elevator and there's just too many people in there, I make sure I just shut myself down for that elevator ride, because I can't process all that so quickly. It's confusing. So I'll just say, okay, elevator ride to the 30th floor. Okay, we're off, begin to open up again. You start becoming just tactics, like, the way you might, or just, like you use different muscles to walk upstairs versus walking on a flat surface. But I think if you kind of get anything from this, is tapping in, becoming aware of the beingness, and then in that awareness, you get more choice. And in more choice is more freedom. And now, if we go back, right, we say how this work fits together. You're allowing your systems, your complex, your awareness to guide you in what needs to fit together. And some things maybe don't need to fit together right now. We're not trying to force it. We're trying to engage consciously with that real I. Later, there's a divine aspect, but kind of like, walking before you run, where we're beginning to connect with that real I. We're giving less power to the monkeys and to the noise in the brain and all that. And we're starting to go, okay, the beingness comes first. And then in that, there's observation and experience. And in that observation and experience, there can be communication, information and communication, not the Google kind, but the detection kind, the awareness kind.
This is really helpful.
Great.
This helps bring together a lot of the pieces that I've been sort of grappling with, and I can relate to that beingness as sort of the starting point.
Yep. Just excuse me one moment. Sorry, Molly's vacuuming and it's getting a little too loud. So I'm sorry, the last sentence.
Yeah, no, I the beingness I can really connect with as the starting place from which everything else
Great
that we work with
excellent.
From.
Yep. And I would just offer as counselors, don't try to force it. Just open. I think just allow.
Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
Jeffrey, I think I should clarify that I'm totally in favor of sitting on the couch and watching a movie, by the way.
Great.
Like, and that's actually funny that two things. One is for like 2 or 3 years, I didn't watch. I just like, I'm a big movie buff. And for 2 3 years, I didn't really watch very much. Me and Kim watched a few movies, but not that many. And then recently, I've started to go and look at some of the older movies, the really classics, and the experience of watching those movies is amazing. Back to your point where you're saying, hey, you're not just sitting on a movie is on a couch and watching popcorn. You're actually fully engaging with the movie. You're fully engaging and really, like, really almost peeking in the eyes of the director and
Yeah.
the writer and the actors, and sort of seeing deeper than what just they're acting out, and seeing that what is it, what are the principles, what is the storyline. So a lot of the older movies just feel, some movies I watch 5 or 6 or 7 times, and I just go watch them again, and they just feel more vivid. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I didn't notice this. I didn't notice this. Like, I've seen it 5 times already, but I didn't notice this. Like, some of these, like Lord of the Rings, some of these really big, even the recent classics.
Yeah.
Just go back and see them again. It's like unbelievable. This is so amazing. I missed all this nuance in it completely. Like the last 5 times I saw it, and
What's changed?
I'm just more aware. I'm just like more connected with everything.
You
Just
did.
like more being. I guess
Yeah.
I'm more just, I'm not just doing everything consciously, like including the playing the video games and cursing myself, and including the having the fourth glass of wine that I shouldn't be having, and smoking the occasional cigarette, including all of that. I'm still being far more conscious, and all of that starts to fall away. It's automatically just starts to fall away, because like, probably stop doing all of that, or maybe not. At least it's falling away slowly, slowly. Just this nature of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's part of the process, right? And what we're doing is, I think the larger thing, right? What are we doing? Connecting us here is what each day, the whole journey is becoming more yourself. One of the things that I've heard that Leo said is one of the jobs is to become more of your astrological sign. Right? And I took that as a particular of a larger statement of becoming more of yourself. And that's what we're doing. We're reclaiming self. There's other parts later, but in this space, we're reclaiming self. Step by step, whether it's lesson by lesson, life experience by life experience, year by year. And then eventually, I'm not there yet, but I theorize that there's a next, right? Because then you start rewriting how things are in the astral light. You start consciously contributing to the engagement with Earth and with life and consciousness. But that, again, walk before we run.
I think that kind of, I think if I understand it correctly, Jeffrey, you're saying we are, by learning, by being conscious, we are becoming the best astrological version of ourselves.
That's a reasonably good start.
And that might take your whole lifetime or several lifetimes.
It could,
And
but
after
it
that,
doesn't have to. It's level
yeah, I mean,
of consciousness, right?
it probably won't. I mean, realistically, was it 5 years? Is it, or 10 years?
What?
Whatever, Leo and Eminent were saying,
Well,
5 years.
the original design for what was called the Eminent stream, as I've learned, this was a 5-year engagement.
Yeah. So I think in 5 years, you become the best version of your, whatever your planets and everything has kind of lined up for you. Right? All those astrological, geophysical, all those things have lined up for you. You become the best of whatever that's lined up for you in 5 years. And then where you go from there, it's up to you. You could go back down or go up, become even better or better than what was lined up for you. Because that's just you have the ability to get there. Everything's lined up. It's bringing you
The
there.
main thing is that you come from a conscious choice.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm a little bit I've always thought astrology and to a certain extent astronomy are limiting, and they're limiting because for most people, even those limits are unachievable for most people. Right? But they're not really limiting. They're just giving you, here's potential you can achieve, reasonably achieve, with focus and intent. Nobody's stopping you from becoming better.
I'll give you a ponder without opening it up. We actually require limits.
This goes into the, if you have a limit, then it's a goal type of thing. Like if there is no limit, then like they say, like if there's no deadline, nothing ever gets done. Like how I'm always eating breakfast into the call. There's no deadline.
I'll
there's
leave
nothing.
it to you to work it out, because I'm sure we can go another hour or more on it,
Yeah.
But
No, I totally get it.
Yeah.
Like, there's no limit. There's no marker. There's no reference to get to, whether it's a limit, then you have nothing to get to. So you just poke around. You're just wandering. If there's a marker, if there's a highest limit, get to it first. Get to it first, and then we'll talk about it later. Because usually humans, by their very nature, will do whatever they can, their best efforts to get to that limit, and let them achieve that first, and we'll talk about what happens afterwards. So that's sort of why we need limits.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Unless there's anything else, we can call it a meeting.
Let's conclude.
Great. Thank you, Jeff.
Right. You're welcome.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
All right. Thank
Thanks,
you both.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a great week.
You too.